This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
This is True Crime XS Christmas.
Okay, so the missing person that we have for today is he's in NamUs as 11746. His NamUs case gets created on July 22nd of 2011. He does have a Charlie Project. Neither one of them have a lot of information on them. There are some images in here. There's a headshot of him, like he's got kind of longer hair. So this is Jimmy Johnson. His name is James Richard Johnson. He is a Caucasian male. He is out of Scottsdale, Arizona. So that's going to be Maricopa County. He goes missing on December 25th of 1986 when he's 29 years old. Again, his name is James Richard Johnson. He goes by Jimmy. He's 5'10" to 6 feet tall. He weighs 140 to 160 pounds, give or take. And let's see. It says that Johnson was last heard from on Christmas 1986 after he spoke with his mother via telephone. Johnson was known to have mental disabilities. Now, he's reported missing out of Scottsdale, Arizona, but this says that Johnson told his mother he was living in Los Angeles. So Johnson's mother says that she last saw James at his residence on February 1st of 1986. He had strawberry blonde hair. It's kind of long, looks like it's past his shoulders, and hazel eyes. Charlie Project is one of those things that basically it just regurgitates that part. It does. They both say that he suffered from some mental disabilities. Basically, same details on the Charlie Project that I just gave you, but it says Johnson's mother heard from him when he called her on Christmas. He said he was in LA. She hadn't seen him since he left his Scottsdale, Arizona residence on February 1st of the same year. Johnson never contacted his mother again. His current whereabouts are unknown, and there are a few details available in his case. But Charlie Project notes that the Scottsdale, Arizona police are investigating. And it gives a phone number, 480-312-5155, and that goes to the Scottsdale Police Department. That's 480-312-5155. Did you find any more on this guy?
No, but one of the things about this particular case I felt like might be relevant, and then I kind of rethought it, but I guess here I am, so we're going to go through what I was going to say. Like, I don't ever want to be like, in the event your loved one goes missing, remember this. Okay, but this is one of those things. So it's touted he has mental disabilities, okay?
Yeah.
But there's no elaboration, right? And I feel like that's why his case is possibly largely discounted. Not discounted in that, like, he's not considered a missing person. It's just there's not a lot of information out there, right?
Okay.
And so my point is, like, I don't know what mental disabilities means. And it might have been more helpful if, rather than that characterization, to like give sort of more information of what he may or may not be capable of, right?
Okay.
Based on those. Like, for example, he didn't live with his mother anymore, right?
Right.
And so, who was he living with? Was he living independently? Because to me, if someone's living independently, I'm not even sure that mental disabilities needs to be added to a missing person's profile, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, those are just my thoughts on this. I just know that, first of all, mental disabilities is different than mental illness.
I would agree with that. I don't think they would use those. Like, I don't think
They
they would
shouldn't use them
interchangeably. Right. Yeah.
Okay, and so a mental disability leads it leads me to think that they're talking about like a certain deficiency in cognitive function, right?
I would agree with that.
Okay, and so I don't know how that is perceived by other people, and I also don't know that it's necessarily relevant unless, like, let's say, for example, he needed to take medication or something like that to put it in there.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just like making too much out of this, but I do feel like that detail it's odd. The other thing is, so his name is James Richard Johnson, and the name James Johnson is a very common name.
There's a lot of James Johnsons out there.
Right. And so there was absolutely no way for me to distinguish, like, if this guy could possibly still be alive somewhere else. That would be my best hope, that he just, like, really didn't want to have anything to do with his old life and he moved on, right? But there's really no way that I can see to track him down. But I did want to mention him because he is someone who last spoke with his mother on Christmas Day of 1986. And he told her he was in California, and it doesn't seem to be any, like, credibility. We don't know for sure if he was in California, right?
Right.
There does appear to be DNA in his case. He has lots of exclusions out here. And so, but no, other than what I had to say about the characterization of him having mental disabilities, I haven't found any other information.
No, I was able to run down some information on him. I found some candidates for him to potentially be alive, but realistically, I don't have enough information to really verify what's going on there. So that's why I left him on the list. Even, like, I kind of understand what you're saying. I looked at it from the perspective of, it would be nice if he were found. The gap in time is strange. It looks like he just kind of gets put into NamUs slowly as NamUs is becoming NamUs.
Right. It's a backlog, I think.
Yeah. So, and it is an Arizona case with a California component to it all. It does have an active investigator that at least has been, relatively recent in how they've been updating.
Let me ask you something. Have you,
yeah.
I feel like that's come up a couple times with this, with the Home for Christmas segment we're doing. Have you come across a NamUs case that doesn't have an active case?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I have come across cases before that it was literally just a data dump. And I have actually come across at least one, and I couldn't tell you who it is right this second, that had a deceased investigator attached to it. And the investigator had been deceased since it would have been put into NamUs. Right. Like, I think there was an 80-something case I was looking at for a completely different thing. And when I went to look up the investigator, even though it had been entered into NamUs in, I think, 2013 or 14, the investigator had passed away in, like, the 90s.
Right, but I'm not sure that the data entry point for NamUs would have any sort of inclination to look anything up or change anything. Right?
No. I think it's literally just a records transfer, and
it's data entry.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So, I'm not blaming anyone for that. It just is. I've seen it, so I try and mention it when there's an active. This appears to be an active investigator. So I don't have anything else for this guy. He's missing since 1986, so he would be roughly 66 today, give or take.
Yep.
So that's our missing person case. All right, so we have an exoneration for today. This exoneration is actually out of Michigan, and it's a more recent crime. So this is a crime that was reported in 2011. There's a murder conviction here, and then there's some weapons convictions as well. And a number of things contribute to this being a very odd case for me. So this guy gets convicted in 2016 and he's exonerated in 2020 for a 2011 crime. At the time, he was 38 years old at the time of the crime. There's no DNA with this exoneration, but this is black male. They keep all those statistics. So I know they keep them in the National Registry of Exonerations. And there's quite a few articles on this case because it has an interesting element to it. But there's no DNA related to this. The contributing factors were mistaken identification by a witness and perjury or false accusation. So the way that this one goes down is a few minutes before 3 p.m. on October 18th of 2011, 23-year-old Michael Adams is shot once in the back as he runs through a parking lot at a strip mall at 3434 Pleasant Grove Avenue in Lansing, Michigan. When the police arrived at the scene, a small crowd had gathered around the body. Officers attempted to interview the crowd, but they had little success. However, one witness who declined to be interviewed, they provided a slip of paper with a license plate number for a vehicle. They said that was from the vehicle the gunman had entered after the shooting took place. So a computer check of this vehicle identifies it as a green 2002 Dodge Durango registered to Willine Pentecost. A police bulletin with, it gets broadcast, basically a bolo. It's got a description of the car and a description of the gunman as a young black man with braids. Now, later at the hospital where Michael Adams is pronounced dead, his mother told police she suspected that the gunman was a man named Herb, who was a black man with braids. Meanwhile, police said that Jesse Bridges, who is a registered police informant, he reported that he saw the shooting and that the gunman was 38-year-old Herbert Alford. Later on, Jesse Bridges said he didn't see the shooting, so he changes his story. Police determined that Alford had been living with Willine Pentecost, but officers were unable to locate him. A photograph of Alford gets sent over to Crime Stoppers, and from there, it gets put in the pressers and shared out with the local media. So on the following day, Shalissa Kittle reported to police that she was in a car in the parking lot and she had seen Michael Adams when he was shot. Shalissa said that she was watching the evening news and she recognized a photograph of Alford as a man she saw running towards a green Durango in the parking lot after the shooting. Shalissa Kittle was a passenger in a car that was driven by Curtis Lewis. So Curtis and Shalissa are in this strip mall parking lot to buy drugs. Their dealer was in the backseat of the car when Adams gets shot, and the dealer bailed out. Shalissa said that she and Curtis had left the parking lot as soon as the shooting occurred. So that's October 18, 2011. Shortly after this, the Durango is found in a parking lot in Lansing. There are no license plates on the vehicle at the time. And police dust the vehicle for fingerprints, and they swab several locations on the interior of the car for DNA testing. Now, in May of 2015, this case is still unsolved when police arrest a man named Gilbert Bailey on charges of selling drugs and a firearms violation. This is important because Gilbert Bailey is Wileen Pentecost's son. He immediately cuts a deal with the police. He provides information on where Herbert Alford is. In return, he pleads guilty to one charge and 5 other felonies get kicked. On May 26th of 2015, Herbert Alford is arrested. He is charged with 1 count of open murder. He's charged as being a felon in possession of a firearm and the use of a firearm during the commission of a felony, which frequently what they do with this is they use that as an enhancement, both on the sentence and on the charge itself. During a preliminary examination, Bridges takes back his identification of Alford. So basically, we're going back to someone from the scene, the police informant from the scene, Jesse Bridges. He says that the police had offered him $1,500 to point the finger at Herbert Alford. The lead detective in the case was a man named Lee McAllister. He said that Bridges not only said he saw Alford shoot Michael Adams, but that he had also identified Herbert Alford in a photographic lineup. McAllister denies offering Bridges any money, let alone $1,500. Prior to Herbert Alford's trial, his defense attorneys, so we've got Jamie White and Alexander Rusick, they are attempting to obtain rental car records from Hertz Corporation. The lawyers claim that Herbert Alford was at a Capital Region International Airport, it's an airport in Lansing, Michigan, renting a car at 3 p.m., which would have been just a couple of minutes before the shooting. At a pretrial hearing in January of 2016, Jamie White reported that he had served a subpoena on Hertz in June of 2015 for their records, but that Hertz had never responded. At a hearing in April of 2016, Rusick reported that although Hertz had been ordered to appear in March, company officials had failed to appear. And the judge would not hold Hertz or the officials in contempt of court. He did say he would issue another order to Hertz to produce the records. All right, so let's just talk about this for a second. This is a long period of time that has sort of lapsed here.
Right, because you're talking about incident in 2011.
Yeah, October of 2011 is when, October 18th of 2011, that's when Michael Adams is shot and killed.
Right. And so after the arrest that leads to the information in May of 2015, it seems like pretty much immediately defense attorneys asked the rental car company Hertz to produce records, right? Because they're establishing an alibi.
Yeah, it's within. It is so fast. It's within days of his arrest. The attorneys, they come on the case, and that's one of the first things they do is they reach out to Hertz. So he's arrested May 26th, and the subpoena goes out in June 2015 because they're just trying to establish, like, if he's there and they have an alibi for him, then that basically squashes the case before the case even gets started.
Right, because if he really legitimately was renting a car at Hertz. Now, I do find it kind of odd that, like, he remembered that's exactly where he was when that happened. But, you know, having established he's at the airport, he can't be in 2 places at once, right?
Correct.
And renting a car is actually one of the very few things that would require you to be you, right?
Yeah, there's multiple
checks,
ways that you
right?
should. Yeah, you should like because it's you have to be a certain age. They have to see your driver's license. They have to take your information. They have to. They do a lot of checking for you to walk away with a rental car, including not just driver's license, but usually a credit card.
Right.
Even in 2011, that would have been the case, correct?
I believe so. Yeah. It was good. It was a good. It was good evidence to provide an alibi.
I thought so. Like I thought, and if you go further than that, and this may not be true in 2011 everywhere, but I noticed when I rented a car, it's been a minute, there were cameras everywhere.
Well,
And
sure.
it was at an airport as well.
I would say that airports definitely have security cameras. I would say that they're going to be SOL as far as getting any sort of footage 4 years later.
Yes, because it's so far back. That's the other thing that causes, I think, the lapse here is like, how long do rental car records last? Because you're talking about a rental in October 2011, and now we're asking for them in 2015 and 2016.
Well, interestingly enough, at first we don't know because Hertz doesn't bother responding. So, what do you think is up with that?
I don't think we really get a great answer for that. It just seems like they don't care.
Well, I don't think it's that they don't care. It's just, Hertz is a corporation. I believe it's a nationwide corporation. And getting a subpoena or even like eventually an order for them to appear to the right person at the right time is it's quite a dance to do, I would imagine. Not to mention the fact that a lot of these places, everybody thinks somebody else is taking care of something, and it was probably a genuine surprise when ultimately they're like, you've missed the judge is like, you've missed turning over this evidence and you've got to do this, right? And I believe the person who finally responds is just an assistant.
Yes.
Which is, to me, it seems like you would want an actual attorney on it, but maybe not. They're not being implicated in anything here. If you think about that, right? This is a peripheral entity in this case, as far as like, there's nothing about Hertz that has anything to do with the actual act of the murder, right?
Yeah, no, it's just his alibi, though.
Correct. And, while it's super important to the defendant, I can see where it was really hard to determine whose purview that kind of thing fell under.
Yes.
And so that's my guess onto like sort of why, and that's why you just have to talk to somebody, right? Which is probably what they ended up doing. Instead of like sending something over, they had to like actually say, look, this is what we need to happen. I would say in the normal course of doing business, especially with like how much is digital now, like they would absolutely still have the records for 4 years. But I could be wrong.
Well, I tend to agree with you. And like generally speaking, there's this side of me that like I end up believing Alfred a little bit because he doesn't have the receipt, the credit card receipt from this, but he remembers like the time, and his story was believable from that perspective of, and I know you said like, who remembers where they were? Well, so if you're making an appointment to pick up a rental car for a specific reason, you may not remember like the exact time you're standing at the Hertz counter. You just remember that you got off work at this time to go do this thing, and then you had to get the rental car, and then you go do this other thing. So you remember the series of events, and you're able to place yourself in time because of those other events, and you remember hearing about the murder afterwards, because this murder did make the news.
Well, not to mention the fact that like somebody gave the police on scene not an interview, but a slip of paper that had his acquaintance. I don't know if they were like boyfriend and girlfriend, but had his acquaintance's license tag.
Yeah, and that's a really specific piece of information.
It really is. And so, there's several things happening here that almost make it seem like even if he wasn't responsible, and while, it could be like, oh, I'm setting up my own alibi, he might have known that, he was about to be framed just based
Well,
on some of the other things that were being said.
Well, I don't know that, like, I understand the idea of like a frame here, but like from the police perspective, when you have this license plate from one person that matches a vehicle that a couple of other people sort of talk about,
But the victim's mother gave an officer the guy's name.
Right. She, at the hospital, she does flat out name him.
Right. And that's according to the police officers, right?
Correct. That's something that comes up at trial. So we get to November 30th of 2016, and Jamie White comes back and says, Hertz is still not complied. And so Jamie White makes a mistake here, in my opinion, and doesn't request the delay in the trial. He's like trying to balance a couple of things, but he does say that he needs those records for his defense. But the trial is starting 5 days later on December the 5th in Ingham County Circuit Court, and he still doesn't have the records when the trial starts. That's a big problem. There's no physical or forensic evidence that links Alford to the shooting of Michael Adams. So we'll put that out there up front. A Michigan State Police Crime Lab analyst testified that there was one swab from the Durango that was tested, and 3 DNA profiles are isolated, and that DNA does link Alford to the Durango.
Which still is, to me, sort of irrelevant, but apparently it held weight. Because the reason I say it's sort of irrelevant is because his acquaintance owned the car. He drove it. Yeah.
So, and they do confirm that he's in a relationship with the owner of the car. So that DNA analyst from Michigan State Police Crime Lab, they tell the jury that it was at least 1.9 septillion times more likely that the observed DNA profile from the front driver's side door from the swab originated from Herbert Alford and then the 2 unrelated unknown contributors than if the data originated from 3 unrelated unknown contributors. That is a really powerful sentence, and I don't think people can necessarily wrap their head around what I just said for the first part of that. 1.9 septillion times.
Right, but to me, you want to know what it says?
What?
It says, like, if you take into consideration that Herbert Alford drove the vehicle, right?
Yeah.
At a time, like, that he wasn't killing this kid, right? It says to me that, like, the fact that there are 2 unrelated, unknown contributors leans more towards he didn't do it.
Well, that's what I would think. It's like he's just caught up. His DNA is just leftovers. Is that what you're getting?
Well, his DNA would normally be there. The weird thing is that there's other people's DNA, right? That's what makes it seem whoever is a normal driver of the car, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't get into all that here, right? But you could expect actually, I would go so far as to say normal passengers and normal drivers of a vehicle, even if it's been a while, it would not be odd to find their DNA in your vehicle. Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I would presume that they had done a sort of a presumptive elimination, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that for sure. It may not have happened. But if you did the presumptive elimination, that means that any driver that drove the vehicle or was a passenger in the vehicle was eliminated. And you're left with 2 unknown, unrelated contributors. Those are probably who you're going to want to look at with regard to who was possibly driving it at the time of the crime.
Right. So, I mean, so the main thing is the Durango does appear to be correctly linked to the scene. And Herbert Alford can be linked to the Durango, but his attorneys, they concede that, and they agree with you. They argue that the DNA test results are meaningless because Herbert Alford has regularly driven this vehicle, and that's because he was in a relationship with Willine Pentecost.
Right. And so I wouldn't have argued that they were meaningless. I would have argued they were helpful for the defense.
That's an interesting approach. That actually, I understand where you're coming from. That makes more sense to
I'm just
argue
saying.
that they should have not focused on the fact that his DNA was there. They should have focused on the fact that that's normal. What's unusual is the unrelated DNA.
Right. Unless there was no additional presumptive testing done, which who knows, right?
Right. Well, it's there. It drives me a little crazy when DNA is brought up and there's still unknown DNA that's kind of in this pile that they're using to like secure conviction, particularly in an instance like this when it, in my opinion, I think you're right. The defense maybe dropped the ball there, and if they would have focused a little more on identifying the unrelated unknown contributors, then they would have a better idea of maybe what direction to go. In my opinion, that could backfire too. They could end up with it being, not like rule outable, excluded parties. You end up with people with alibis or people that couldn't possibly have been there. Then it makes it look more likely that it could have something to do with him when you throw around these big words like 1.9 septillion.
Right, but that's just basically the 1.9 septillion is only stating that it's more likely that his DNA was combined with the two unknowns than it was three unknowns.
Yeah, I understand.
See,
I'm
that
just saying
skews that statistic even more so, right?
I think some jurors wouldn't understand what was being said there.
Yeah, I agree with you.
We've seen that quite a bit recently. The next part of this is we're in the trial. Curtis Lewis, he testifies that he and Kittle, the woman I mentioned above, that they drove to the parking lot and they were going to buy crack cocaine. After the dealer with whom Lewis is going to buy drugs from gets into the back seat, Lewis said he saw an argument erupt between two people on the sidewalk in front of a barber shop that was located near Vaughn's Market. Lewis then said so this is all happening in and around the strip mall. Curtis Lewis said that he then saw a short man who turned out to be Adams run past his car, and that there was a taller, slim man chasing him. Lewis said the taller man shot Adams in the back, and the gunman then got into the rear passenger seat, so the back seat, passenger side of the Durango. There was another man waiting in the driver's seat, and another man then walked up to the Durango and got into the front passenger seat, and that vehicle sped out of the lot. According to Curtis Lewis, he didn't recognize any of them. He said when this happened, that the dealer bolted from the backseat of the car, didn't want any part of this. And Lewis then drove himself and Kittle out of the lot. He admitted that he was unable to identify the gunman from a photographic lineup, and in that photographic lineup was Herbert Alford's photo. He also admitted that he had been freebasing cocaine since 2:00 a.m. and was there to buy more. So this guy has been on a 12-hour bench. Now, he says he has. He says he's been using cocaine from 2 a.m. till 3 p.m. But then Kittle testifies that she's sitting in the passenger seat next to Curtis Lewis. She maintained that they were not there for cocaine, but they were there to buy marijuana.
I guess that doesn't actually it doesn't contradict him saying that he'd been freebasing cocaine since 2 a.m., but only that they were there to buy more cocaine.
I would agree with you, and I would also say that all of this is possibly true.
Well, sure. And, the stigma associated with cocaine is much, much different than marijuana. So,
And well, crack is even more so than cocaine, wouldn't you think?
I feel like, yes, but I would say that like marijuana is a plant, right? And like cocaine is considered more of a hard drug, just like crack would be more of a hard drug. And I feel like Kittle might have just been more comfortable saying they were there for marijuana. I have no idea, right?
Well, it could also be that Lewis didn't bother to tell her. She said she wanted some weed. He said, "Come with me."
Sure.
And he was going to get crack, and she was going to get weed.
Sure. And honestly, it's pretty much irrelevant.
It is, but it is what is being brought up at trial, which is how we get there.
Right. And then, you have to start. Actually, I think if he had been freebasing cocaine since 2 a.m., I feel like he could have had a really accurate account of what was going on, right? Because doesn't cocaine make you like hyper focused?
It can, yeah.
Super energetic.
It depends on where he's at in his fix, but yeah, it can do some of those things. So Kittle says that she sees Adams run past the car and that she sees him from about 2 car lengths away. So not very far. She said she heard gunshots and then she saw Adams grab at his back and fall down. And then she also said that she saw the gunman get into the Durango and describes a similar scenario as Lewis as the Durango has driven off. Now, her testimony was that Alford was the gunman and that she recognized him after she saw his photograph on the television news. That's going to be a tainted testimony, but I'm sure they don't really address that here. Otherwise, I don't think we would be in the situation that we're in. All right. So then Lansing police detective Damian Manson, he comes on and testifies that in May of 2015, he had been looking at Pentecost's son, Gilbert Bailey. He had specifically been investigating him for drug trafficking. So Manson has been making controlled undercover purchases of both cocaine and heroin. So Manson and other officers end up executing a search warrant at Gilbert Bailey's house. During that search, Bailey tells Manson that he knows where Herbert Alford is living. So on May 26, 2015, based on that information, the police are able to arrest Herbert Alford, which, that's coming up at trial now. Gilbert Bailey testifies, and he gives various accounts of his activities on the day of the crime. He says that Herbert Alford drove him to True Styles and Fades barbershop, which is in that strip mall, and then drove him back home. He said he subsequently went to attend a class at Phoenix University on Lake Lansing Road. Later on, while getting a ride home, he said he began getting text messages from his cousin telling him that Michael Adams had been killed. So Bailey gives different times and different accounts of how he gets from place to place. He admitted that Pentecost, the mother of the owner of the Durango, was his mother, and that he did not get along with Herbert Alford. He said that Alford did not pay rent, and that Alford had been having an affair with a different family member, which is Gilbert Bailey's aunt. So I assume it's either I assume it's mom's sister is what I assume. I don't know that for sure. Bailey testifies on the morning of the day of the crime. He heard Alford telling Willeen Pentecost that he had been robbed of 50 pounds of marijuana and that he was trying to identify the thief. All right, I'm going to pause that right there for a second. 50 pounds of marijuana is a lot of marijuana.
It is a lot of marijuana.
It's a lot if you've got like super well packaged, like 2-pound bricks. It's 25 of those. And I don't know how many people are really familiar with what marijuana looks like before it gets to that state. but marijuana is a big, fluffy, lightweight thing.
I was going to say, yeah, it's very, very light. So it takes quite a bit to get it
to brick
50
form.
pounds. Yeah. Yeah, but keep in mind, so this particular witness is he has cut a deal.
Yeah, he's cut a sweet deal
Okay.
based on his own cocaine and heroin problems. Gilbert Bailey says to the jury that on the day of the crime, Alfred suggested that he go get a haircut and that he'll pay for it. So he's going to take Bailey to get a haircut. Bailey said that Alfred drove him to the barbershop in a rental car. He said Alfred was outside talking to people while Bailey was inside getting his haircut. Later that afternoon, according to Bailey, he saw Alfred driving the Durango, and the Durango was, quote, flying. So Gilbert says that he immediately after learning of the murder, Gilbert said that immediately after learning of the murder, his mother and other family members, they moved from Lansing to Detroit. They were literally gone by the time he got home from school that night. He said he assumed they feared retaliation from the family and friends of the victim, Michael Adams. 2 months later, while in Detroit at William Pentecost's house, Gilbert Bailey says that Herbert Alford was there briefly and he left, and that he had cut off his braids. 6 months later, Gilbert says that he saw Herbert again, along with another man at Pentecost's home. That man and Herbert went into the basement, and Gilbert testified that he overheard Alfred talking about the crime. So, and this is something I want to throw out there and kind of get your opinion on. Do you think he's genuinely hiding because the police think it's him? Herbert Alford, who Bailey is describing seeing in Detroit at his mom's house, has moved and is hiding because the police thought he was involved with Michael Adams' shooting.
I'm not sure. I feel like he's cut the sweet deal and he's got to give him something, right?
Yeah.
And so he goes back and forth because he says that he didn't care for Herbert Alford because he didn't contribute to the household. So essentially, Bailey feels like he is taking that Herbert is taking advantage of his mom, right? Pentecost. But yet he offers to pay for his haircut that day, right?
I know a lot of this is contradictory.
Well, right. And then the other thing is there's all this, I would say, sort of independent testimony with regard to a Durango that is owned by Pentecost,
right?
Being used in association with whomever murdered this kid, right?
Right.
Okay, and Bailey's testimony is that Herbert Alford drove him to the barbershop in a rental car.
I know.
Okay, and so the other part I found odd, at least here, is like there's no information about what happened after the haircut.
Well, he just says that he saw him later driving in the Durango.
Right, but he doesn't talk about like...
The testimony literally cuts from, he had taken you to get a haircut and then you saw him outside. And yes, later in that day, did you see him? Did you see him again? Yes, he was driving the Durango. And what did you notice about it? The Durango was going very fast. It was flying. So that's how it goes. Like it cuts through that. You're right. It drops. We don't know what happened in terms of once they left the barber shop, like how do we get the rental car Durango situation sorted?
Sure.
It doesn't make sense. Okay, so Gilbert says that he overhears Herbert talking about this crime, and he specifically says, I heard him say he had to kill him because even though it wasn't his stuff, he still had to pay somebody back for it. So he's still hung up on this 50 pounds of weed thing. Then Gilbert Bailey said that he heard Alfred talk about the shooting at a barbecue at William Pentecost's home on another occasion. He quotes Alfred as saying that he just confronted the guy and the guy said he did have some weed or whatnot, and it went from there. He just wanted to get back what was his. So the prosecutor's a guy named Michael Cheltenham. He asked him, do you recall him saying anything else? And Bailey testifies, he wanted to get back what was his. He shot Adams because Alford wanted his stuff. Now, Gilbert Bailey admits on the stand that he had made a deal with the prosecution to testify against Herbert Alford. In exchange, he was allowed to plead guilty to maintaining a drug house, which is the least serious charge in his stack of felonies that he's facing. He was facing possession of a firearm, manufacture and sale of cocaine, possession of marijuana, distribution of marijuana, and all of those charges get dismissed. Now, he also says on the stand there are a couple more things. He doesn't specify what. But he says the agreement I recall with the prosecution was they would give me probation as long as I came to all these court proceedings regarding this case. During closing arguments, defense attorney Jamie White tells the jury that Kittle's identification is suspect because she saw Alford's photograph during a television report saying he was wanted for the shooting. Now, that's 100% true. That should have been suspect. It should have been pointed out that it was suspect. So I'm glad that that came up, even if it's during closing arguments. Now, the other thing that Jamie White says, he says that Gilbert Bailey is a pathological liar. And the only honest thing you've heard from him over the course of the last week is when Mr. Cheltenham, the prosecutor, asked him, "Are you a criminal?" And Gilbert Bailey looked up and he said, "Yup." So that's the end of the trial. And on December 13th of 2016, the jury convicts Herbert Alford of second-degree murder using a firearm in the commission of a felony and being a felon in possession of a firearm. So second-degree murder, then an enhancement for using a firearm, and then the fact that he possessed a firearm to begin with because of his prior criminal record. He's sentenced to 32 years and 5 months minimum to 62 years and 5 months maximum in prison. That's a long time, but it's not as long as I expected for a second degree with, it's 32 years. So it's going to be, it's going to be basically life for him. It's going to be 70 when it gets out, 70 something when it gets out. But attorney Daniel Bremer, he files an appeal on Alford's behalf, and he asks that the Michigan Appellate Court remand the case back to the trial court for a hearing, and that the trial court force Hertz to disclose the records relating to Alford's rental. In February of 2018, that motion for relief or remand is granted. So Daniel Bremer, again, he seeks these records from Hertz. The first response is in a letter dated March 7th, 2018. This comes from the person you were referencing. That's Carolyn Fry. Carolyn Fry is his senior legal assistant. Bremer says that Fry said a search was conducted and no records were found. Bremer also said that Fry claimed the records would have been purged since they're from 2011, which at this point in time is almost 7 years. Bremer insisted that a representative of Hertz come and appear at a hearing on the motion for a new trial. But a few days before this hearing on March 16th of 2018, so this crime is in 2011, he's convicted in 2016, arrested in 2015, convicted in 2016. We're now in 2018. Hertz finally shows up and brings with them the records. So from the time of the first subpoena in June 2015, it's almost 3 years before they produce these records, which is wild. So Daniel Bremer then files an amended motion for Alford, and it's for a new trial, saying that the records show that Herbert Alford rented a car at the Hertz facility at the airport at approximately 3 p.m. So in this motion, it says this was 5 minutes after Officer Richard Thomas said that he was dispatched to 3434 Pleasant Grove to the strip mall in Lansing concerning a shooting incident. According to Google Maps, the airport is 7.9 miles from 3434 Pleasant Grove, and the driving time would be 19 minutes by the fastest route. in June of 2018, the prosecution opposes the motion. They claim that records from Alfred's cell phone, which were not introduced at the trial, showed his phone pinging off of cell phone towers near the shooting at approximately 2:29 p.m. and traveling north to the airport, pinging off towers along the way at 2:58 p.m., 3:04 p.m., and 3:06 p.m. Had Alfred been at Hertz at 3:06 or 3:07, that would have been sufficient time to travel from the location of the shooting to Hertz at the Lansing airport, according to the prosecution. Okay?
Yes.
Okay. August 6, 2018, Circuit Court Judge Clinton Kennedy III, he grants the motion for a new trial, and he vacates Alfred's convictions. This is what he said in his declaration and his order. This court finds that the new evidence makes a different result probable on retrial because it could have significantly aided the defendant in refuting the prosecution's contention that the defendant was the man who chased and gunned down the victim. The newly discovered evidence could serve to create new suspects, could serve to impeach witnesses' testimony, and render all the other evidence less than enough to convict beyond a reasonable doubt. In response to the prosecution argument that cell phone records show there was enough time for Alfred to kill Adams and get to the airport, Judge Kennedy basically said, this court finds that this is a question of facts for the jury to decide. So Jamie White and Russick, who had represented Alfred at the first trial, they get reappointed to handle a second trial. On February 19th of 2020, Alfred finally gets out on bond, pending a retrial. The court orders that on August 6, 2018, and the retrial release or the bond release happens February 2020. So it's still, time is still dragging by. But on December 8th of 2020, the prosecution finally dismissed the charges. Defense attorney Jamie White, he issued a statement. He said, "We believed in his innocence the entire time, and we are happy that prosecutors finally conceded there wasn't proof of his guilt." And for December 2020, Herbert Alford made it home for the holidays. Now, Carol Seaman, who is the Ingham County prosecutor, said in a statement to the media, "We do not believe that we can prove Mr. Alford's legal culpability by the beyond a reasonable doubt standard. We have an ethical burden not to present cases that we do not believe can be proven at trial, regardless of any ambiguity about what happened on October 29, 2011. I thought that was kind of a crappy way to handle getting it handed to yourself there. Like, I hate when prosecutors talk out of both sides of their mouth.
But this wasn't necessarily the prosecution's fault.
It's not. That's not. I'm not saying anything else. Like, okay, so they're not going to win because Hertz finally coughed up the records. It's Hertz's fault the records weren't there. The judge is the one who decided that it was enough to let Herbert Alford out. But the prosecution is still saying, we have an ethical burden not to present cases we do not believe can be proven at trial. Regardless, we know what happened. We know he did it. I mean, it is what it is. Now, Alfred ends up filing a lawsuit against Hertz. And if you go Googling for Herbert Alford, that's what you're going to find is the lawsuit against Hertz Corp, which is he seeks damages for them failing to turn over the records of his rental for 3 years.
That's going to be really hard to, is there any sort of resolution? Because, honestly, beyond a court order, Hertz has absolutely no duty to do anything to help him out. So if you go to the White Law web page, let's see, I think that's what it was. Yeah, so whitelawllc.com. So that, I think, if I recall correctly, that's Jamie White's firm. I don't know who his partner is. Okay, yeah. So all of the people that are involved in Alfred's case, James White is the founding attorney for their firm, or for at least one of the firms involved here. He actually has we're suing Hertz blog post up. And here's what he says. I don't know when he put this up because he didn't date it. Attorney Jamie White is representing Herbert Alford in a case that is making national headlines. What's the backstory? In 2018, Alford was wrongly convicted of a second-degree murder that occurred in 2011.
The shooting death of Michael Adams occurred in Lansing neighborhood, 20 minutes away from the airport, where Alfred was renting a car from Hertz. Alfred could not have committed the murder because he used his credit card at the airport at 3 p.m. on October 18th, 2011, 6 minutes after the murder occurred. Nevertheless, Alfred was wrongly convicted, facing a 30 to 60 year sentence. The only evidence Alfred needed to prove his innocence was the car rental receipt, but Hertz failed to cooperate. The car rental giant ignored subpoenas and court orders for years. Our client had to pay the price. Despite requesting the receipt in 2015, Hertz didn't produce the receipt until 2018. Alfred spent 5 years in custody for a crime he didn't commit as a result. This would not have happened had Hertz promptly turned over a much-needed alibi receipt, proving our client was not responsible. In response to this horrifying injustice, attorney Jamie White recently filed a lawsuit seeking financial compensation on behalf of Alfred. The suit alleges that Hertz ignored 2 subpoenas and 3 court orders demanding the receipt that proved Alfred did not commit the murder. The case may take a while because of the company's bankruptcy reorganization. However, we are committed to fighting for compensation on behalf of our client, no matter how long it takes. Our attorney is working tirelessly to hold Hertz accountable for its negligence and wrongdoings that ultimately led to a false conviction. No amount of money could ever take back the 5 years Alfred lost in prison, but financial compensation will significantly help our client get back up on his feet. I don't see a resolution. That's still on their website like today.
Yes, I'm just pointing out Hertz had absolutely no duty to, I mean, beyond the fact that they were eventually ordered by the court, right?
Yeah.
A private corporation or a public corporation, think about if every single person wanted to use Hertz as their alibi, right?
Right.
I feel like that the position you just read off there is a little bit ridiculous because I feel like the lawyer contradicts himself in stating that he used his credit card when clearly the credit card holder would have access to their own records and could present that, right?
That's what I was thinking just now while I was reading that. I don't understand how that gets to be that big a deal.
I understand what they're doing because in theory, like Hertz would be inclined if there were to be like some sort of anything that made them think that they might have to end up paying here, they would be inclined to settle it as opposed to go to trial. But I don't believe in the position as it's been presented. I feel like the appropriate action for Hertz's inaction in responding to court orders, right, would be for the judge to hold him in contempt, and he didn't, right?
Yeah, that's ultimately where I land with it all.
It's going to be really hard to get any sort of, tortuous negligence claim over on them because in order for negligence to happen, a duty of care has to be established first. And it's just not established that people that we do business with have to provide us records when we need an alibi, right? That's not something that's going to be a thing.
Huh. Well, it's interesting. I've seen some like weird stuff with Hertz basically having some other problems along the way. And Alfred came up recently with this lawsuit. I noticed that he came up when Hertz was being forced to tell a court. I don't remember which jurisdiction it was, but apparently they had some kind of problem where there were 165 or 200, somewhere in there, customers who said that they had been wrongfully arrested for the theft of Hertz rental cars.
Well, that's a completely different situation.
No, I'm just saying this came up during that. And, but also like the judge had to force Hertz to turn over records.
I think they have, I think that this is like incompetence. I can't imagine like the entity of Hertz being like, let's defy the judicial system, right?
No, I think it probably never gets to the right person.
Right. And then certain people don't have the authority or they don't know how. And then,
That's
they
exactly it. Yeah.
they try to get it to the right person or they try to do what they can. But ultimately, sometimes people will send it to whom they think is supposed to do it and they assume it's taken care of. And like it got put on the very bottom of that person's to-do list and they'll see it in about 10 years. And I do think that there's no ill intent there, right? Because especially like you said, like as far as people getting arrested for stolen vehicles, that sounds like quite a rabbit hole.
It is. It is. Don't go down that one.
Yeah, I typically don't research things like that. But as far as like companies being in certain positions to do certain things now, I mean, you can ignore a subpoena, I guess. It's not usually the best thing to do, but ignoring a court order is like definitely a bad idea. And I would say that at Hertz Corporate, wherever that is, they should probably have one specific person who is responsible to respond to subpoenas and court orders, right? And they should streamline that process for all of their nationwide employees, right?
Yeah.
So at any point in time, if anybody receives this, it's got to go to this one person, and then that one person can make sure it's taken care of. Beyond that, I mean, what can you do, right?
Nothing. So I got to ask, and this will be my last question for this one. Do you think he did it?
I don't. Honestly, I don't think that the evidence that was presented that was allowed to vacate his conviction, I would have to hear the entirety of the case. And like the judge said, whether or not there was enough time and any other relevant information would have been a question for a well-informed jury to decide, right?
Yeah, I would agree with what you're saying.
So because I didn't sit through the trial, I don't want to say like, yeah, he did it. But I don't think the 3:00 car rental, I don't necessarily think that absolves him. Now, I feel like the prosecution dropped the charges ultimately because so much time had passed. And I feel like they kind of just gave up.
They definitely just gave up. But I think that there's a very small bucket here. And if you look in that bucket, like of the people who were testifying, they were at the scene, et cetera, that day, you will find the person having testified against Herbert Alford, who was the trigger man. I just don't think it'll be who people expected. I think Bailey's a possibility, but I also think there were enough other people around that shenanigans going on, like that somebody in that group would have done it if the Durango was really there.
But I felt like Kittle's testimony was probably was relevant and probably credible because, she is the one who saw it. I mean, she did see a picture of the defendant associated with the case, but she called in and she gave information and she gave like self-deprecating information. Like we were there to buy drugs, right?
Yeah, but she said we were there to buy marijuana.
Well, it's still drugs, right?
Yeah. I don't know if the people, I follow what you're saying. Yeah.
I'm just saying that like, it's unlikely to put yourself in the position to lie and during that lie to, admit you're committing a crime, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so because of that, her testimony was that 3 people got into the vehicle, right?
Yeah.
And to me, like, that's still not the one defendant who was convicted, whose conviction was overturned, right? I mean, there's
Yeah.
still two other people there, right? So who
Yeah.
are they? And there's more information available, but this more than likely, the people that were involved, I still don't, man, I would love to know. I guess it's like some sort of message, but like, what does shooting someone in the back accomplish with regard to them stealing 50 pounds of marijuana from you?
No, that didn't make sense to me either. I mean,
Well, somebody shot this kid, right?
yeah, but who's it going to be a message to?
What?
Who's it going to be a message to?
Well, I have no idea. I feel like that sometimes it escapes people that make decisions that kill people who owe them money. It escapes what they're actually doing, and they're just reacting out of like emotion, right? Like anger,
Yeah.
as opposed to being like, I'm going to put you to, you're going to do 50 pounds of marijuana worth of work for me, right? The message, I assume, is that since we are dealing in illegal activities and I can't go to the police, when someone steals something from me, because I can't go to the police, I kill them. And that would prevent other people from stealing from you, right?
Yeah, I shoot them and say I was at the airport.
Right. And yeah, but there's so much there and so much time had passed, but I don't know if he did it or not, but it's tragic that I believe the victim was 23 years old. This was actually one of the hardest cases for me to comprehend because of, I don't know what it was, maybe the number of sort of not really relevant people that are introduced, right?
There are a lot of those.
And so it was a little bit hard for me to follow initially to kind of get it sorted out. But for the most part, I hated that 23-year-old Michael Adams. I mean, I guess his murder's will go unadjudicated now.
Yeah, unless something pretty concrete comes down. I don't actually see. I'm sure there's a way to try this case again with somebody in the defendant's chair. I don't know what that would be. Once you've done this kind of prosecution, although I know it happens in the movies and Law and Order and shit like that, where they try something a second time. But a lot of times, and I'm not, I'm with you. It's a tragedy that Michael Adams is killed. I'll say that first. But a lot of resources aren't necessarily dumped into these sort of, like, they used to literally call these misdemeanor homicides, where something happens in an area where it's known that, drug use goes on in that area, and like the strip mall, and a crowd of people is there. Nobody saw anything. And it's sort of, like you said, it goes unadjudicated. It just languishes.
Right. And, to be fair, like they did go through the process once, right?
Yeah, they definitely went through the process once. But what I'm saying is...
No, I understand what you're saying. They're not going to put the resources to do it again.
Well, the automatic defense to a second trial, unless it's the same defendant, is, well, what about when that guy did it?
I don't know that would work because his conviction was overturned. But maybe, they could possibly do that, I guess. That would be up to the judge to not allow that to be introduced. But who knows? Either way, it is what it is. And so he was exonerated.
Yeah. This was a sad one. This was actually sadder than I thought it was going to be. Because I feel really bad for the kid that gets shot in the back running away.
No kidding. That's so awful.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Christmas.
All right, so I'm going to tell you guys a few things about some of the folks who are helping sponsor our show. Now, Labrati Creations sponsors our show, and you can always use the Crime XS code there. You can also just message them at Labrati Creations, and they will generally do something for the people who come from True Crime XS. They were our very first sponsor. They've done a lot for the show, and that code is CrimeXS at LabratiCreations.com. The first new advertisers that we have, and I've selected all of these guys. I've selected all of these advertisers. So the very first one is Cure. Now, I'm going to tell you guys about this, about Cure as being one of our sponsors. If you're an athlete, you know that proper hydration is key to peak performance, but plain water can be boring and sports drinks can be filled with artificial ingredients and added sugars. That's why we love Cure. It's a clean and effective way to stay hydrated and perform at your best. I use it late in the day when I switch out of caffeine mode. Specifically, when I hit the pool or I go play tennis with my wife, I use Cure to help me stay hydrated. It helps me recover after a long day. Now, you guys may not know this, but I build things. And right now, I've been building several structures on our property out here. Among those is a new podcast studio space for myself. I do a lot of that work at night and into the wee hours. And I always have some Cure with me to go into my aluminum water bottle. Hydration is not just about filling up my aluminum bottle with water. Cure Hydration is an oral rehydration solution that contains the perfect balance of electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb water and rehydrate quickly. Whether I'm building things or putting the podcast together or chasing these dogs that you sometimes hear in my studio up and down the trails to get them worn out, Cure Hydration is the way that I choose to go. Cure Hydration is an oral rehydration solution, or an ORS, that contains the perfect balance of electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb water and to rehydrate quickly. The formula is made with all natural ingredients like coconut water powder and pink Himalayan salt. It's free from artificial flavors, from sweeteners, and preservatives. Cure Hydration is vegan, gluten-free, and non-GMO, making it a great option for anyone with dietary restrictions or preferences. The packets are convenient and easy to use. You just mix them with your water and you drink. They're perfect for on the go. They're perfect for travel. And anytime you need a quick and effective hydration boost, ready to combat dehydration, then you try Cure today and feel the difference for yourself. You can use code TrueCrimeXS for 20% off your order. That's TrueCrimeXS. I have a link that I'm putting in the most recent episode show notes, and True Crime XS will get you 20% off. Our second sponsor for the show today is Laird. Now, Laird has a list of things that they want me to tell you about. They have better ingredients with amazing taste and functional benefits. They have a superfood creamer crafted from the highest quality, all-natural, real food ingredients. All Laird products are sustainably sourced and thoroughly tested to ensure that you're incorporating the cleanest, finest fuel into your routine. They have all natural whole food ingredients, and they contain naturally occurring MCTs made from coconut oil. There's no artificial flavors, there's no colors or additives, and there's no sugar from highly refined corn syrup. They want me to talk about my love of coffee, but the truth is, I don't do much with coffee. But let me tell you someone who does. My wife has to have a cup of coffee every day. Now, I've fallen off recently, but one of the big things that I've done since the beginning of our relationship is she used to go and get a Starbucks every morning. I have substituted that out by always trying to make her coffee. It's not going to be every single day of time from when I met her, but for the most part, almost every day, I make her coffee. I put her creamers together, and I make sure that she has a good way to start her day. So with Laird, he started experimenting with his morning ritual almost 2 decades ago. He found that when he started adding fats to his morning cup, like coconut oil, he had amazing energy throughout the rest of his day. He gradually perfected this recipe for an epic cup of fuel. and he began sharing it with his friends in the surf community. I'm an ocean guy, so I saw this item and I was like, okay, we're going to try this one out. Are you ready to feel more energized, more focused, and supported? Go to lairdsuperfood.com and add nourishing plant-based foods to fuel you from sunrise to sunset. And you can use our promo code at checkout to save 15% off your purchase today. Our offer code for this for Laird is going to be True Crime XS. Pretty much everywhere except for Lab Body Creations. If you use True Crime XS, that will get you, at Laird, it'll get you 15% off. At some of the other places, they'll get you 20% off. I'm going to tell you about two more sponsors today. So the first one is, the third one is Liquid IV. So let's talk about the real reasons that you need to hydrate. Late night TV binging, back-to-back Zoom meetings, going on a walk with your friends. Everyday hydration is not just for high energy athletic endeavors. Liquid IV is the #1 powdered hydration brand in America. It's now available in sugar-free. This is years in the making, but Hydration Multiplier Sugar-Free uses a proprietary zero-sugar hydration solution with no artificial sweeteners. It's got 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, but it's also got 8 vitamins and nutrients for everyday wellness. Liquid IV hydrates 2 times faster than water alone. Keep your daily routine exciting with 3 new flavors. They've got white peach, green grape, and lemon lime. I love all of these flavors, but I think that my favorite is probably the green grape. White peach I use as a secondary flavor, and lemon lime I leave here for my kids and my wife. Liquid IV believes that equitable access to clean and abundant water is the foundation of a healthier world. They also partner with leading organizations to fund and foster innovative solutions that help communities protect both their water and their futures. To date, Liquid IV has donated over 39 million servings in 50 plus countries around the world. You can get 20% off when you grab your Liquid IV Hydration Multiplier Sugar-Free or any other variant at liquidiv.com and use code TrueCrimeXS at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code TrueCrimeXS at liquidiv.com. And the last sponsor I want to tell you about is Zencastr. We're part of Zencastr's creative network. We've been using Zencastr since about midway into our first season. Meg and I experimented with a lot of different ways to put the podcast together. And the truth is, Zencastr was an integral ingredient to us being able to bring you this show. It's so easy. It's now super easy. You can record a podcast with Zencastr. You can log in using your browser and you start recording a high quality podcast right away. You can record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests. You get to feel a sense of zen knowing that Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you will always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. You sound your best. I mean, if you've ever worried about what you sound like, Zencastr's post-production process makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes those ums and ahs in your recordings. It removes those awkward pauses in conversation too. You can set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. That's how you don't hear my dogs every second of every episode. Zencastr is all in one. If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are now over. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place, and you can distribute to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations. Just go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code TrueCrimeXS, and you're going to get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. You can also check out the other plans they have available. I want you to have the same easy experiences that I do for all my podcasting and content needs. So zencastr.com/pricing. The offer code is TrueCrimeXS, and it's time for you to share your story today. We are also adding New Era as a sponsor for the show. New Era Cap is a headwear and apparel brand founded in 1920 in Buffalo, New York. Now, I actually have some experience with New Era caps. My dad and I have been through multiple iterations of baseball caps through the years. We collect different styles, different eras, and now my teenager has started his own cap collection and has several New Eras as the centerpieces. Our favorite teams may not be the same, but our outfits are all topped with the same New Era ball caps. We love the quality and the ability to wear what the players are wearing. Not to mention, New Era is the leading headwear manufacturer with quality licensed products. You can support your favorite college or pro team in style from the official headwear provider for the MLB, NFL, and NBA. You can get a stylish accessory for your everyday ensemble and support True Crime XS. Just shop the official headwear and get 15% off when you go to neweracap.com. That's neweracap.com/truecrimexs. You can also use the code truecrimexs at checkout. That's it. That's all you have to do. And that's 15% off your order using the promo code truecrimexs.